Hey guys, Chip here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a really quick study on modeling this, what I call a power cell. And it's originally created by Vitaly Bulgarov. And what I want to do is demonstrate the power of Design Magic Boolean modeling. And there's a couple reasons why I chose this object to model. One of them is the simple fact that I know that Vitaly uses solid modeling software. He uses Moy 3D mostly to do these kinds of objects. And it's like Fusion 360 or others. And I want to show the power of the new Booleans in Blender and how strong they are and how well they compete against real solids modelers. And the second reason is that I want a reference model to work from. And the purpose of that is so that you can see that I am not just modeling something that is necessarily easy, but I am actually trying to replicate an existing object. The other component of that is the fact that we are using a non-destructive workflow. So it means we can continually go back and forth and refine our model as we want to make it look more and more like the original, or in some cases, we may want to make some changes to refine it. And that's a real important part of the whole Design Magic workflow. So this video will play back at 4 times speed. It took me just a bit over an hour to model this in real time. And I didn't necessarily pay all the attention I could to proportion. I did want to move very quickly to show you how fast one can model using Design Magic. So let's get started. Okay, let's get started. So first I just start off by grabbing this cylinder. It's a solid, right? And I'm using the solidify modifier to expand it. Next, I'm going to actually select it and I'm going to put this cube on top of it. And the reason for that is that cube is going to help me align things to it as I add them. And so as I move forward, you'll see I start adding some things to it. And I'm adding them to the cube, and I know that I'm getting it centered perfectly on the cube. That way I'll get it centered on the actual object itself. So that's a real good thing to remember. And that cube needs to be a Boolean addition. So that's part of the plus KidOps collection. So now I'm just taking one of the inserts from the minus collection, and it's a mirrored insert. So I'm just editing one half of the vertices here, and it's got bevel modifiers on it. So it makes it really easy to change it. Now, one of the great things about this approach is that you can continually tweak it as you go. And as you see throughout this video, you're going to see me actually continually change this one modifier because it's critical to the overall shape. And so these bevels are critical. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll take these vertices, and I'll zero everything out and then just get the lines right and then come back in. And you'll see some of that later on. But right now we're trying to get that cut out just exactly right. And as you can see, I'm getting pretty close to it. Again, for those of you that missed what was going on above it, that cube is real important in terms of setting up a reference object that we can use to snap to. Here I am, I just copied some from that exact same cutter, and I've just copied them and put them in there. And now I just need to hit the F key to make sure that it's a face. And if I don't make it a face, it's not going to actually cut through that surface. So that's what I've got. Now I'm, again, doing the same thing, adjusting it. I'm adding a few more vertices using the right-click subdivide button. I add a few vertices, and then I can just select those vertices and add the bevel weight. And as I'm adding the bevel weight, I can just drag that slider back and forth, and I'll get the correct bevel weight. Now I'm getting a little bit of artifacts, but you'll see as we move forward, as we start adding more and more cuts to this, those artifacts start to go away, which is kind of cool. So next what we're going to do is I'm going to cut the sides off of this. And again, I'm using just a Design Magic negative cube, and then I just mirror it about the y-axis. And now I can just adjust that cube. And as I'm adjusting it, I'm tweaking these at the same time. I'm actually looking at the photo we looked at earlier for a reference, and that helps me in terms of understanding the proportions and all that. And as you can see that I've got that red is it's showing basically some of the inverted faces, which happens when you Boolean things. And so a lot of times I want to be able to see those just in case I have an issue with it. And then I'll always use the Control-Alt-Shift-Z key to actually hide the viewport for that particular insert and turn it into a bounding box. Now I'm adding another insert, and this is just one that creates parting lines. and I'm just kind of adjusting it using the vertex snapping mode of Blender to kind of move it where I want to. I'll select these vertices and just hit Control X to delete them. Now I'm moving around quite a bit on the bevels. I'm adjusting those as we move forward. And now I'll move this over, and I'll notice that I need to adjust the screw to get it to go long all the way through it. I could have also just stretched it, so I'd do it either way. I'll come back to that later. This is just a regular plain cube, and I'm just going to cut it through the side here. And once I get it where I want it, I'll add some bevels to it, and I'll Control A and make sure that I set the scale correctly for that cube. And of course, I need to mirror that also. And now I'm going to add this little circle cutter in here. And one of the interesting things I'm going to do is I want to put another circle directly in that center of that circle. So I'm going to leave it high up. And so now when I add this other circle, it's going to go directly into that circle. So now I have both of those centered. Turns out I didn't really need that at the end, but it is something, it's a nice little trick to be paying attention to. By the way, I'll mention that all the booleans are set to fast here. They're not set to exact. And I didn't really have much trouble, as you can tell, working just in the fast boolean mode for this whole project. So now I'm just adding that little insert, which was it was a DM plus insert, and I added that in there, and now it's another cube, again stretching it and moving it around and cutting into the surface. And this is, again, it's a very solid modeling kind of approach, very much like what you would see in something like Fusion 360, although it goes quite a bit faster in many ways. So now I just mirror things, I start looking at it, and I'm just basically going in and looking at the reference image, and I'm just adding to it the different parts of the model as I see that I need, and keep adjusting those. And so some of those are the details. And again, because we are in a non-destructive mode, I see that that needs to move out a little bit, and I can do that very easily here without having to go through a lot of vertex and face editing. I just basically can move the actual cutter objects or edit the vertexes of the cutter objects. So it works out pretty nicely. One of the things I also mentioned is that we have in this object a lot of the modifiers are being used that I've created for KitOps. So it's a kind of a good example to study. It's it'll this product will ship with the Design Magic. So I'll make sure that you get a copy of this so you can study it if you need to. Now I'm just going into these ribs. I'm just going to cut out some ribs here, set that up, and I'll just move it in there. And once I get it set up, I like what it looks like. I'll Shift D and rotate it, and then select that one at the bottom and Shift D, Z, and then rotate, leave that the way it is, and then just modify it just a little bit to get it. So there's our ribbing segment. So now we're kind of just looking at it, seeing where I want to go next, and adjusting a few of the different parameters. I got this little tiny little guy in here that I noticed that I had missed, so I'm going to put him together. Again, being non-destructive, I can come in and edit these as I want. And I'm also looking at the width of this, and I'm saying I need to change the width of that so that it's not quite as stark. And I'm going to move, I'm continuing to adjust the proportions to make sure I get something that looks like the reference model. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to create this handle object. It's in the cable collection, but it works like a cable pretty much. And what I do is I just position it to where I want it to be. And then very much like a cable, I'm going to just select these vertices, and I can just move them how I want them, and the actual handle will follow with it. So I'm just moving vertices around, and now I'm setting a mirror to make sure I mirror it, and I want to mirror it about the object itself, and then I make sure I turn bisect on. In this case, I had to put flip on also. But so now we know we have a good solid handle, And now I'm going to mess with trying to get the actual bending right on it. And as you can see right now, it looks okay, but I don't like that particular bend. So I've got to rethink that. So what I've done is I've applied the scale, and then I've gone ahead and selected all the vertices and hit the Alt S key to scale that up, because that's part of the skin modifier that's being used here. And once I've got that done, then I can go into the vertices and add more bevels, as well as a heavier bevel weight for those. And now I'm also adding a little more weight around the sides, and you can see I'm moving it in and out and adjusting it so I get it pretty much the way I want it. And then I'll go in and I'll grab just this standard rib cutter, and I can just, again, it's just 4 points, and I'm going to just line these guys up, and I will set this up so that it looks again like the reference image. And so I'm going to start subdividing a bunch of these vertices and moving them around. And as you can see, it's just kind of a trial and error kind of thing. You just keep subdividing, adding stuff. If you don't want a vertice, Control X, you delete it, and it works pretty good. It just takes a little patience to keep moving things around. I like using the scale button, so I'll hit SY0 to scale everything on the Y-axis, or in this case it'd be SZ0, and that's a great little shortcut that I have that I use all the time. So again, looking at the reference image, you can see that we've got quite a lot of detail in this particular side detail. So I'm going to cut through here, make sure it gets in the right spot, and that looks pretty good. I think we're in pretty good shape there. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab that reference document or reference cube and put it in there. And now I'm going to use this as another mirrored insert cutter. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create this kind of a T, inverted T detail for the interior handle or gripper or something like that. And once I've got that set up, I'll go to kind of an oblique view like you can see right here, so I can get these proportions correct, and then I can slide it down and start cutting into it and get it set the way I want to. Scale it a little bit, move it around, and get it where I like it. And then once I like it, it's Control Alt Shift Z to set the insert to a bounding box display in the viewport. Okay, now I'm using a pipe. So this is a pipe insert. I'm going to up the subdivision a little bit, just jacked it up. I'm going to make sure that it goes a little farther than the end, because I'm going to have to cut the ends off because they have those little balls on the end. And now I'm just doing the same thing I did with that handle. I go in there and I create a mirror of it, and looks like it works pretty good there. And then I can scale it up to get where I want. And now I'm going to want to create a cutter. In this case, I just used a cube because I knew that I didn't need to turn this into something other than that. And so I just used a cube and cut on it, and then just added slice, put that cube boolean up above the mirror so that when it mirrored that cube with it. So you can see now I'm just adjusting that boolean to cut into that little secondary handle there. I'm moving my reference cube to the bottom of the object now, because I'm going to be cutting some more details out here. This was a little bit difficult. I couldn't quite tell what was going on, so what I ended up doing was pretty much thinking that I'm going to create something on this side and just mirroring it to the other side. And I think that's what that model was showing. So and because this actual cutter already has a built-in mirror in it, it makes it pretty easy for me to just go in and adjust this and adjust the bevels and cut it out, and then make sure it cuts out a little bit on the sides there, as you can see. And we'll just kind of drop it down. There we go. Let's see where it sticks. That looks pretty good there. And then we mirror that, of course. And now we're going to want to look at the object and see where else we need to do some work. And we're going to add this little slope cutter into it. And the slope cutter is a pretty cool little cutter, actually. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it, but this one just, it snaps. I snapped it directly to the face, so I know I'm in the center, and just dropped it in there, and then turned on the bevel, so I get these little bevels on it, which look nice, and then mirrored it, and that turned out just fine. Now I'm going to cut out on the top of this. And if you see, I zoom in, and I want to make sure that I'm cutting into that hole. And I'm just dragging that down just a little bit. So I want to just cut the top of that down just a tiny bit. And you'll see how that did nicely. And then I've got this little bevel cutter. And so this is kind of cool. What I can do is I can take this and I can rotate it. And I'm trying to find the right position. There it is. So I'm going to rotate it out like this. And I'm going to use this to cut, to put a bevel, a smaller bevel, on that side right here, on that side. So you can see there's my bevel and there's my cutout right there. And so I'm just going to position this right on top of it. And this takes a little going back and forth, and I've adjusted the vertices over and over and checked it. But it's really a nice way of just adding a bevel when you know that that you're not going to be able to add one in post. I mean, I might be able to add one later, but I don't think I would. I think it would be really hard. So this way I can just add a bevel because I'm just basically cutting it out. And I'm just adjusting these vertices to make sure I get something that's going to work for me and be accurate. And then I look at the final. It looks pretty good. And of course, then I mirror it. And so now I'm looking at what I need to do next. And I realize that I need to start adding some details. So I'm going to go in here and start adding these little inserts, these little tiny guys. And it turns out, excuse me, it turns out, unbeknownst to me, that I put these in the wrong place, and I'm going to come back and fix it in a second. But as you can see, it's pretty easy. Once you drop something in, you X, Y, mirror it, and it just drops. It just sets it up very quickly. And I've gone in, I'm going to copy the actual scale of that one, so I make sure I get them all the same. So I'm dropping this one in here, and I'll just go into scale, and I'll just paste it. So I know I've got the same one there, mirror it, and then I'm going to add this little slot detail in here. And these, I realized they were wrong, so let's go ahead and add them again. Drop them in. And we Shift D and move them up, and they're mirrored. And we're, add another one right here on this side. And you can see we're kind of coming to the end now. We're finishing up a lot of this. I do realize now that this handle goes up too high because I'm missing a little pivot point here. So I went in here, cut this out, and centered it and cut it out. And then I went in and I decided I wanted to add a positive Boolean on there, and then I realized I don't really want a Boolean. I want this to be a separate color, a separate piece. So I looked at it and said, okay, delete that. Let's go to my solids. So I'm adding a solid in. Now it's not a Boolean. So now I can make this whatever color I want. I can still mirror it to the other side, which is what I just did right there. You can see it looks pretty darn good. And then this thing is the same thing. I'm trying to add it to this handle, but I realize I need to remove the KitOps properties of that handle. And then once I've done that, it's simple to mirror it to the other side, which is what I just did. It turns out I had to mirror it about the target object, which was, of course, the main object there. And we're going to power save our product as we go. Now I'm going to add a few decals, because we're coming to the end here, and there's one. And let's wrap it around that surface by just clicking the shrink wrap eyedropper. Change the color a little bit and mirror it, and then we'll grab this danger one, stick it in here because he had a danger icon on his, and so we'll add that and change the color on that. Let's go to the free KitOps materials. We'll add a dark anodized, and we'll add some steel handle and some steel buttons and things like that. So, and really that's it. That's all there is to it. And you can see that the rendering turned out Really nice.